After hearing that the initial amount of stock that Jack wanted was going to cost $500,000, and this was the initial stock, Kevin was relieved. It seems that he's not here to joke, he thought to himself. After they came to an agreement, the contract was drafted. The contract of supply was that the maximum stock that would be supplied would be worth $30 in 3 months. This was the time that Jack was going to starting, and could be said that it would be a testing period. Of course, Jack wasn't worried about losses at all. After all, with the 100 times income multiplier system, the income would definitely be higher than the losses. But he wasn't ready to run a business at a loss. After they were done with the contract, Jack brought them to the store that he'd purchased the previous day. The three raised their brows. They were wondering to themselves, this guy is so rich. Why would he need to open a store in such a backward place? But they didn't dare to ask the question out loud. So they followed Jack into the store. Although the store wasn't that big, it was decent in the street that they were in. Jack turned and looked at them. Then he said, "If you guys work well, then I might make you the leaders of the branches of the surrounding streets. This is the benefit of being my first employees. As for the salary, don't worry about it. The better you perform, the better your salary. So, don't worry about the figures that are written on the contracts." Jack ignored their astonished gazes and added fuel to the already burning flame. "Thank you, boss." The three thanked him in unison. They clearly knew that their qualifications weren't that high. So, for them to be in charge of an entire street was something big, not to mention a few other streets. Jack nodded and said to George, "The truck will be delivered here in about 30 minutes. You'll go to Pristine Agriculture Products PAP to get the stock that I just paid for." "Yes, boss," George replied. His excitement couldn't be hidden at all. After all, he had just driven an SUV and he was going to drive a popular truck, Cascadia. He liked racing and thus was a car enthusiast. Jack then looked at Agnes and Charles and said, "I guess you two know what to do." "Yes, boss." The two nodded in reply. Jack then left them the $7,000 that he'd earned the previous day for them to get lunch as well as for change. He then left telling them that he would be back before the closing time of the store. He wasn't worried about the issue about the prices as the logbook was there. He had told the truck shop manager that George was the one that would receive the Cascadia Freightliner. Now, he was going to take his meal before going to the real estate agencies to get himself a good house. He left with the Betnagi. After all, his bike and the sports car were left at the Bentley shop. Jack ate in an ordinary street stall. Of course the car attracted attention of the crowd, but Jack wasn't in the mood to discuss with them. Immediately after he was done with the meal, he immediately headed back towards the center of the city. The mansion that he wanted to buy wasn't found in the streets like Yellow Street. He had to find an estate that could accommodate his cars without causing discussions among those that would be seeing it. But there was a decision that he made. The house that he just rented, the apartment, he wouldn't leave it. He would be staying there in case he came to Yellow Street to supervise the stores. It didn't take more than 30 minutes before he arrived in front of a real estate agency. It was called Homescope Properties Limited. This was amongst the popular real estate agencies present in the city. After packing his car, he immediately headed towards the 5-story building. After entering, the service could be said to be good enough as he was welcomed by the enthusiastic salespersons. "Papto Ione Som, hello handsome. What would you like today? Buying a house, renting, we offer all of these services at an affordable price. One of the sales ladies immediately introduced. The others that had rushed over immediately shook their heads as they left while feeling dejected. Currently, Jack was having $27,510,086 in his account. So, he wasn't worried about buying a house. So he went straight to the point. I want to buy a good mansion that has a good parking space. One that can accommodate at least 6 vehicles. Hearing what Jack just said, the lady's eyes widened as admiration immediately filled them. This was obviously a rich person. He wanted a mansion that had a parking space of at least 6 vehicles. This implied that he had at least 6 cars. So, she straightened her posture and made sure that her clothes were okay. By okay, I mean that she made sure that the top was revealing a little skin. Obviously trying to honey trap Jack. But who was Jack? He had been a member of Alfonso family for 19 years of his life. It was obvious that he had experienced such situations before. After all, although he wasn't favored in the family, if the girl could get together with him, they could use him as a bridge to meet with his other brothers. He was experienced and this wasn't moved at all. He ignored this and asked, "Do you have a mansion that matches my taste?" "Yes, we do have it. It is in the most popular and suitable place for people with a high status. There are actually 2 mansions there and they're named Prince and Princess Palace or PP. What's more, the environment is relaxing. There's an artificial lake that is at the center of the 2 mansions separating them. They're connected by a bridge that is made by the most popular designer in the country. There's a garden where there are several rare and almost extinct species of trees are planted. It can be said to be the most luxurious place for a person to stay. As for the parking, there's a huge parking space that can accommodate at least 10 cars. Jack was impressed by the mansion. It seems that this was what he wanted. But he knew one thing for sure. The price of the mansion wasn't going to be low at all. The Celeste had mentioned these 2 mansions on purpose. If they're sold, not only would she get a higher commission, but she would get promoted. She made sure to give the description of the mansions well so that Jack could get the image of it. Just to make sure that Jack was convinced, she brought him to the highest floor where there were several models of the mansions and villas that they were selling. Jack looked at the model and felt that the lady's words were no exaggeration at all. This place was indeed a palace. What's more, it was surrounded by a high 15 meters perimeter wall. This in itself was a show of the security. After looking at it for a while, he looked at the lady and asked, "So, how much for this mansion?" "The mansion is priced at $38 million. Of course, it was this price that has made it not to be sold for a while now. After all, Incode City is a small city, but the designer of the mansion had the intention of attracting the big shots here. The lady was quite honest. Her words, she knew that the price was high and most people would back down immediately after. So, what is the payment plan? Jack had expected that the price would be high. He could see that the level of the Prince and Princess Palace was higher than the one that Alfonso family owned. You can pay 50% deposit and the rest have to be paid within a year. As for things like renovation, you'll not have to worry about them. The mansions are ready and one can move in immediately," the lady replied. Her eyes were already shining with the sign. She could see that money was just getting closer. After thinking for a moment, his balance was only $27,510,086. That meant that he was still short of a little over $10. 5 cents. To get this, he would need a little while longer. Furthermore, he wanted to expand the grocery department. Thus, he still needed money, so he couldn't spend all of the money in his account yet. 50% was $19. So, Jack decided that he would pay $20 in deposit. Then, he would pay the rest during the month. After making the decision, he looked at the lady and said, "I will pay $20 in deposit. The rest will be paid during the month. Do you think you can handle the procedures?" The lady immediately got excited. Jack didn't try bargaining about the price and immediately paid a deposit of $20. The remaining would be less than half, only $18 that Jack had just said that would be paid within a month. So, she smiled brightly and said, "Of course, I can handle it. But it would still need the manager for the contract to be completed." Jack nodded and sat on a chair in the waiting area. In about 10 minutes, a lady rushed towards him with a few documents. She immediately introduced herself. "Hello, esteemed guest. I am Sabrina Folk, the manager of Homescope Properties Limited in Kuwait City branch." Jack returned a greeting politely as he introduced himself. There was no need for him to put on airs. So, he was a simple person, just like how he was back at home. "Mr. Jack, we can give you a 10% discount for the mansions. So, the price will be $30,200,000. So, after the $20 down payment, you'll be left with $14.02. As for the duration of the payment of the balance, it's always supposed to be paid within a year, so you can take your turn. During this 1 year, you will have the certificates of ownership for the mansions, but if the 1-year period passes without the payment being completed, the certificate will be revoked and you'll be refunded with 85% of your payment. I don't know if you can agree with these terms," Sabrina asked after she talked about the terms of the contract that had to be signed. Jack nodded. He was going to finish the payment within a month. He didn't like having debts hanging over his head. After the two came to an agreement, Jack signed a contract and the procedures for handing over the ownership of the mansions was completed after half an hour. After Jack did the payment, he was left with $7,510,086. This was enough for the expansion of the grocery department. With more stores, he would be able to get more money and the income would be multiplied by 100. That way, his account wouldn't be left empty. Jack left the agency accompanied by the manager, Sabrina, to go and take a look at the mansions. It took them about 20 minutes to get there in Jack's Betnagi. Just as they had said, the area that the mansions were located was an area that was silent. He could see that there were several luxurious mansions that had been built in the area. This was obviously the rich's residential area. This residential area was known as Windhill Residential Area. This was where the leaders of the city and other bigwigs stayed when they visited the city. One thing that interested Jack the most was the fact that Prince and Princess Palace was located at the heart of the residential area. This meant that this was the most expensive mansion in the entire city. Jack was sure that if he went to another city, then there would surely be other mansions that would be worth more than this. He knew that there were several people that could afford to buy this palace. But who would waste so much money to buy a mansion in a small city? This was the thing that had made the palace remaining hanging for over 2 years since completion. Jack looked at the high perimeter wall and the majestic gate in front of him. Then, after Sabrina showed her it, the guards immediately opened the gate, allowing Jack to drive his Betnagi. After the gate was opened, Jack was welcomed by a warm atmosphere. The environment here was indeed good, as it gave a different vibe from the one that he'd just experienced at the gate. In other words, after passing through the gate, it was like he had entered a different world. At the gate, he could feel the majestic and domineering vibe. But once he got inside, he found that the atmosphere was warm and elegant. Even while still at the gate, he could clearly see the lake in the distant few hundred meters. The lake itself had a diameter of about 1 kilometer. There were various plants that were in the lake that made it look beautiful, from the flowers that were floating there. He could see that their flowers like water lily. These lilies had been well arranged, as he could see that they were divided in terms of colors. Closer to the edge of the lake, he could see that there were red lilies, then followed by purple, orange, and finally blue. This was at the side of the gate. The other sides of the lake had other flowers and plants that made the lake look like an artistic painting. There were several white swans that were swimming in the lake. Jack couldn't help but appreciate the beauty and elegance of this place. The Betnagi moved slowly at the side of the lake that had been tiled. Jack could see the two mansions that were on the opposite sides of the lake. They were at the shore of the lake. To be specific, Papto Ione saw so as to make sure that he wouldn't be missing anything. Jack immediately headed to the parking area. He was already familiar about the setting of this place through the model that he'd seen back at the real estate agency. Just like they had told him back then, he found that the parking lot was indeed big. It was as big as 3 basketball courts. The area was 35-36. The floor was tiled by the interlocking road tiles and was painted royal blue. There was a roof on top, but their walls there were kind of modern. They could rise and fall. If they rose, then the parking area would immediately become an enclosed space. Once they were taken down, it would be an open space with a roof. The walls were controlled by a remote. Furthermore, these walls were quite sturdy. After parking the car in the parking lot, Jack, who was accompanied by Sabrina, immediately began moving around. Sabrina did the introduction, as she had been here a few times before. This time, she wanted to take as much time as possible so that she could enjoy the place. After all, who doesn't like luxury? She took Jack around the place, showing him how big the place was. The garden was as big as 5 basketball courts. There were several swings and chairs where a person could relax. Jack nodded as he felt the cool and relaxing breeze in the garden that was accompanied by a sweet scent of flowers in the garden. He was tempted to stay there for a while, but he held back the urge. After all, it was already afternoon and the sun was really hot, thus the temperatures were high. After getting out of the garden, they headed towards the mansions. He found that the mansions looked majestic, just like one would expect of a palace. After all, these 2 mansions were called Prince and Princess Palace. So, they had to give the vibe of a palace. One was painted blue with golden dragon paintings added to the walls. They looked lively and added the domineering and majestic vibe to the mansion. This was the palace that Sabrina introduced as the Prince Palace. After entering the mansion, he found that everything inside was a work of art. Although he wasn't a person that followed artistic work so much, still, there were times that one had to appreciate good works if it was seen. The decoration of the whole mansion was really designed for royalty. The bedrooms had big beds. The kitchen was fully equipped. The only thing that made Jack feel was lacking was the fact that this place was so empty. If he stayed here alone, it surely would be lonely. But What could he do as he didn't have a girlfriend yet? The Princess Mansion was the opposite of the Prince Mansion. Unlike the Prince Mansion that gave a majestic vibe, the Princess Mansion gave the gentle and warm vibe. It was painted green, complementing the garden that was just behind it. Even the decorations were kind of gentle ones. It was all about beauty of nature and other things within this mansion. Just like the Prince Mansion, this mansion was fully equipped. Water, electricity, furniture and other equipment that a person needed to survive were there. The only thing that he would need would be to get food and he would be able to stay. The bridge that was connecting the two mansions was an artistic work. The design was pleasing to the eye. Furthermore, the bridge was placed in a position that one could have a clear view of the lake below. The reason for this was because the floor of the bridge was made of glass. The glass was transparent but was sturdy enough that it could support a few 100 kilograms. Jack felt that the palace should have been worth more than just $38. After all, not only were the mansions big and luxurious, even the space that came with them was bigger. But he wouldn't complain about saving a few dollars. After seeing that everything was set, Jack immediately sent the address to the Bentley shop so that they could send his cars here. The area of the mansion was so big in that there would be no problem fitting 24 cars. Although not all the cars that he was planning on buying were going to fit in the parking lot, there was still a lot of space that was tiled. So, there was nothing to worry about the cars destroying the vegetation. During the time of departure from the mansion, all the security guards were called over. Then Jack was introduced as the new owner of the palace. The guards saluted him in respect while their eyes were filled with admiration. These guards were all members of a security company called Good Vision Security Limited. They were popular in the country and that was the reason as to why they were given the job of protecting the palace. While on their way towards Homescope Properties Limited, Jack asked for the information of the designer of the palace. He had liked the way that the place was designed and he wanted the company that was in charge of it to help in designing his enterprise's logo and stores. After taking her back to the agency, Jack changed his destination to the municipal that was in charge of the stores in the city. He didn't want to buy things and start it over. He wanted to purchase the stores plus the stock and employees. If there were any changes that needed to be carried out, that would happen later. At least for now, the most important thing to do was to get more groceries. As he thought of this, he asked the system, "Either way, system, I don't want to believe that the grocery store hasn't yet earned $1. Why is it that till this time there's nothing about the income being multiplied?" Ding. The income will be multiplied immediately if you're present, but if others are going to take care of the work for you, then the multiplication will happen at the end of the day, week, month, year or trading period. Jack nodded. He then asked the store, at what period would the multiplication happen? Ding. Since the store is still smaller than small, then the multiplication will happen at the end of the day as soon as the store is closed. If the stores that you're going to open get linked in that they share the same payment system, then things might change depending on circumstances. Jack was left speechless by the system once again. What was smaller than small again? After sighing, he decided to ignore that comment. Jack decided to wait for evening then. So, for now, he put his focus back to expanding his influence. He got to the municipal office that was in charge of business in the city and then inquired about acquiring the grocery stores. "You want to purchase the grocery stores?" The officer in charge of the purchase and sales of the stores in the city asked. They were inside the office. Yes, if there are people that want to sell their grocery stores, then I would buy them. Then if there are those that can be asked to sell, and willing to pay a reasonable price, I get it. So, currently, in the entire city, there are about 14 grocery stores that are on sale. They still have stock, but not that much. The employees are still there too. So, would you like to rent the stores and buy the stock, or would you like to buy everything? The man asked.
I want everything to be transferred to my name. That means that the store, the stock, and the employees, the logbooks and the past dealings of the store should be left behind too, because I don't want the business to be influenced by the transfer. Jack replied, if that's the case, then it will take some time for us to complete the procedures. The man said, is there any that can be completed today? If there's, then I'd like to prioritize them. Jack said after a moment of thought, currently, those whose procedures can be completed on this day are 7. They are all located closer to the heart of the city, but not the center. Their location is good for business, and there isn't that much competition. After looking through some documents, the man said, so, how much would it cost to get the procedures done as fast as possible? Jack asked. He was willing to spend to earn. The total cost of the stores together with the current stock would be at least $5,700,000. We will need to do further calculations according to what they have now, the man said as he looked through the records on the computer. It doesn't matter. You help me complete the procedure with the amount that you've stated as the base price. Jack waved his hand. He had been moving around the whole day, and he wanted to get a rest. So, he wanted to complete the procedures faster. Immediately, Mr. Jack. The man replied before he began making a few calls. Jack decided to stay there and wait for all the procedures to be carried out. This was a government office. So, the procedures that would have required a long time could be completed faster than if he went to private companies. After all, there were some processes that required an official's approval. Just like he had expected, the process only took slightly over an hour. During this hour, the only thing that Jack could do was to play with his phone. After all, he couldn't just stay idle for a whole hour. During this time, he had sent a text message to ask George about the delivery. He had said that the Cascadia Freightliner had arrived at the store, and he was currently on his way to delivering the grocery products that Jack had paid for. Jack was now getting assured that in the evening today, he would get more than 10 million in terms of income. The previous day, he had gotten $1 million. That was considering the fact that there were no vegetables, which were the grocery's main specialty. That, together with the 7 that he was going to acquire at this time, there would be no issue in getting the 10 million. As he was still playing a game on his phone, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Before long, the door of the office was opened before Zach stepped inside. Zach was the one that was attending to Jack. Is it done? Jack asked. Yes, Mr. Jack. Everything is done. The only procedure that's required would be your signature. Zach replied as he handed to Jack 7 different documents. Jack received them. He found that they were the agreement of ownership. There were also ownership certificates of the shops that he had just purchased. He had already given his details and the bank account number. So, the income that would be received on this day forth would be transferred to his account. After seeing that there was nothing wrong with the contracts, he immediately signed his name. Then, he gave his bank card. Zach immediately swiped the card, and Jack entered the PIN to complete the transaction. Jack didn't blink when he was paying. The end price was a little lower than before as it seemed that the stock had reduced. The total cost was $5,580,000. This total was rounded up after a small 2% discount. Now, Jack's balance was $1,930,086. He then got up, ready to leave as he had already finished what had brought him here. Mr. Jack, if I may be presumptuous a little bit, may I ask if you're a member of Alfonso family of Crystal City? Zach asked when he saw that Jack was done. Reduce belly fat within few days. Spike. Jack was surprised by this question, but after a moment, he understood why that question had been asked. After all, although he was no longer a member of Alfonso family, he couldn't change some details on his birth certificate, driving license, nor in his ID. He could only continue using them as they were currently. So, On his ID, Zach had seen that Jack's full name was Jack Alfonso. During the introduction, Jack only said that Zach could call him Jack, and he didn't mention his surname. That was why Zach decided to call him Mr. Jack, as a show of courtesy. According to what he knew, Jack was supposed to be called Mr. Alfonso. But, since Jack didn't seem to want to use the name, then Zach couldn't force it. Not really, Jack replied before exiting the office. Oh, I see, Zach said, more to himself than Jack. Since Jack said that he wasn't a member of Alfonso family from Crystal City, then it might be another Alfonso family. After getting out of the office, Jack wanted to visit the shops and see the changes that would need to happen. But upon seeing that it was already close to 5 in the evening, he decided that he would be visiting the stores the following morning. After all, when it reached 5 in the evening, that would be the business peak hours. He wasn't ready to disturb the business at all. So, the only change that had occurred in these 7 stores was the account number that would be receiving the income. As for the contracts like the supply contract or purchase contract, they would need to negotiate once again. After all, the terms of the previously signed contract was according to the previous owners, so he would have to state his own terms. As he was thinking of these things, he failed to pay attention to where he was going to for a moment and ran into someone. It seemed that this person was in some kind of a hurry as she was rushing towards the office while almost jogging. Just as she was going to fall, Jack stretched his hand and held her by her waist. Then, the gazes of the two met. It seemed that time had frozen at this moment. What a beautiful girl, Jack thought to himself as he stared at the emerald green eyes that were staring at him in both confusion and surprise. The face with a thin layer of makeup of the girl in his hands was like a well-carved sculpture. Big eyes, long eyelashes, small nose, thin red lips, an oval chin, long black hair that was shining in from the reflection of the lightning in the building. In terms of beauty rating, she would be rated at 98. This was a great beauty. For some strange reason, Jack's heart that had never been moved began beating in a strange rhythm. There was a kind of special feeling that was attracting him to this girl, and for some reason, he didn't hate the feeling but strangely wanted to embrace it. What a handsome man! The girl exclaimed in her mind. She was having something urgent to take care of in this government office. She was rushing in that she forgot that she wasn't the only person that could be moving in the building and ended up in a man's arms. After a moment of confusion, she focused her gaze at his blue eyes that were staring at her with some kind of emotion that she couldn't read. The handsome face, well-curved cheekbones, sharp eyebrows, the determined and stubborn aura, the special silver hair. This made the man that was holding her look like a handsome work of art. She was drowned in the eyes that were staring at her and that she forgot to get out of his hands. She could feel his strong hands wrapped around her waist. If this was another time, she would have definitely slapped him for touching her. But, this time, she was lost and had lost her composure. And to make it worse, for the first time since she could remember, she was feeling shy. This was exactly against what she was during a normal situation, or when facing other men. Ahem. At this time, a gentle cough woke the two out of their daze. The two then separated from each other, but their eyes still stared into the other's eyes. Seeing that the two were still staring at each other, the lady that had just coughed spoke, "Madam, we're getting late." Oh! Only then did the lady snap out of it as she threw Jack a last glance and left with her personal assistant. Jack also got back to his senses at this times. He then stared as the lady left. Although there were two of them, for some reason, he could only see one. As she left, in her female official business suit, her bold and confident steps gave the vibe of a boss lady. Jack stared at her till she disappeared from his vision. It was only then that he came back to his thoughts of what he was supposed to do. As he walked out of the government building, he thought to himself, "That's really strange. This strange feeling, I don't know why she gave me this somehow familiar feeling. But, I guess I can forget about it for now. If we meet in the future, I'll see what this is all about." He got into his Bentayga and drove towards one of the grocery stores. He wanted to purchase some foodstuffs so that he could get food in the mansion. He was going to spend the night there after all. In about 10 minutes, he arrived in front of a grocery store. It was called Comest Grocers. It was far bigger than Alfix grocery store that Jack had bought the previous day. Jack didn't come here for business. This, He entered the store alongside the customers that had began increasing in number as it was time for people to get back from home. He picked rice, flour, eggs, sugar, salt, a kilogram of beef, garlic, pepper, tomatoes, and other things. The good thing about this store was the fact that it was like a mini supermarket that dealt with grocery products. There were shopping baskets that Jack used to carry all the things that he'd chosen. He then went to the counter to make the payment. He could see that there were 3 counters where the payment could be done. This was truly a bigger scale as compared to Alfix, so the income had to be higher. When it was his turn, Jack immediately paid for his products. None of the workers here knew that he was the boss, so they never gave him any special treatment. But overall, Jack could see that the service quality here was good enough. He paid via his card as he had no cash on him. It cost him $2,700. He had bought a good number of things here. They were packed in a bag. He was just about to leave the store when his phone rang. He found that it was a new number that he hadn't saved. So, he didn't know who the caller was. He received. Immediately after, a male voice came through. "Good evening, Mr. Alfonso. I am the manager of Comest Grocers, Daniel Urich. I've just gotten the information that you've purchased our store." The voice was filled with respect and uncertainty. "Oh, you can just call me Jack and not Alfonso," Jack corrected. Since he was supposed to stop using the family influence, then he wouldn't accept a person calling him with the name Alfonso. Daniel was at first surprised by the young voice followed by the words. Well, not that it mattered. He was at first uncertain whether Jack was a member of Alfonso family from Crystal City. But now that he was being corrected, maybe he wasn't. "Okay, Mr. Jack. I would like to ask if there are any instructions or changes that you would like to be made," Daniel asked. "I am currently at the grocery on Falcon Street," Jack replied. Comest Grocers had 2 branches and 1 main store. So, Jack was in one of the branches. "I do happen to be there too. I'll be down in a minute," Daniel replied before Jack hung up the call. In about 2 minutes, a middle-aged man on a suit rushed down from the upper floor. He then rushed towards the exit of the store, ignoring the confused gazes of the customers and the workers. When he arrived, he called Jack. He heard a phone ringing closer. He then looked in that direction and saw that Jack was busy packing the things that he'd just bought from the grocery. Daniel immediately rushed over after hanging up. He then stretched his hand forward to greet Jack once again. "Hello, Mr. Jack. I am Daniel Urich." Jack shook his hand as he nodded. Then, he went straight to the point. "There's no need to worry about the changes. I've been in there and I can see that things are good enough. So, in case there are any changes in the staff members, that will have to wait." Daniel nodded in both appreciation and agreement. Changing the staff at such a time would definitely cause problems. Of course, this is about major changes and not 1 or 2 people in lower positions. As for the income, you can transfer it into the account that has been given to you, I presume? Jack asked. "Yes, I've received the account." Daniel nodded. Although Jack looked younger, he didn't behave like those second-generation kids who only knew how to spend money and not to earn. "Okay then, I'll be seeing the staff tomorrow. You can tell me at what time there are not that many customers so that I can come," Jack instructed. "I got it. At most, it's always around 10 in the morning. At that time, the number of customers is always the least," Daniel replied. "Then I'll leave everything to you," Jack said before getting into the Bentayga as he headed towards the newly bought Prince and Princess Palace. Daniel watched as Jack left before turning around and heading back to the store. He then called to the person that was in charge of this branch. "The new boss will be here to see the working staff tomorrow. I hope that you'll be prepared by 10 in the morning." The person in charge, Wycliffe, replied. "Okay, you can leave now." After Wycliffe left, Daniel immediately called the other branches in charge and told him the same thing before leaving to head to the main store. Not long after driving, Jack got to the mansion. The guards respectfully opened the gate for him. He found that the Bentley Continental GT had, and the Suzuki had already been delivered by the Bentley store. He had previously left them there after taking the Bentayga. After parking the car at the parking lot, he immediately carried the things that he'd just bought from the grocery to the mansion. This time, he decided to stay inside the prince's palace. He liked the domineering and majestic vibe the most. After keeping those that needed to be kept fresh in the fridge, the rest like rice, sugar, and so on were stored in the kitchen cabinet. The kitchen of this mansion was designed for a large group of people, 7 in the least. After all, the kitchen was too big, just like how the cabinets were. After all the things that were bought by Jack were placed inside, they didn't even occupy 5% of the cabinet shelves. He immediately headed to the bedroom on the second floor via the elevator. That was where the master bedroom was located. The designing was so good. The bed was so huge in that it could fit more than 5 people. The material that was used in making the mattress was the best Jack had experienced, as it was so soft and comfortable. After taking a shower and changing into a bathrobe, he put the clothes that he'd just worn into the cleaning machine. He left all of his clothes back at the rented apartment room. He then dried them using a blow dryer. Then after putting the clothes back on, he immediately fell asleep on the big and comfortable bed. He didn't wake up till it was 8:30. He got down so that he could prepare food. After all, he was hungry as he hadn't taken dinner after such a busy day. This time, he decided to make himself a decent meal. He took the meat that he'd just bought and cut it into smaller pieces. He was going to make beef fried rice. This was something that he'd learned from the internet while he was still at the Alfonso family mansion. The ingredients were cooking oil, shallots, minced garlic, sliced scallions, raisins, cooked rice. Took him a few minutes to cook, soy sauce, fish sauce, ketchup, juice of 1 lime. Then, the cooking procedure followed. Heating the cooking oil in a wok or frying pan, he sautéed the shallots, garlic and scallions until aromatic. He then added the raisins and tossed around until heated through. Turning up the heat, he dumped in the rice and stirred to break up lumps. He seasoned the rice with soy sauce, fish sauce and ketchup before stir-frying until the rice was heated through. Finally, he drizzled in lime juice before stirring. He then tasted it as he adjusted the seasonings. Seeing that it was okay, he immediately served after it had cooled down a little bit. He made sure that the warmth of the food was just good enough for him to eat without worrying about burning his tongue. After this satisfactory meal, he went upstairs where the bedrooms were. Going back a little bit, I'll give the setting of the mansion. The one that occupied the largest space on the ground floor was the main hall, which would be the living room. There was a large LG 65-inch OLED Smart TV CS series. That was where, just in case there was a gathering, people could watch the news. The custom leather sofas occupied the most of the living room. There were twin throne chairs. These were obviously for the prince and the wife. The sofas and the throne chairs surrounded the big rectangular glass table. The table was just like the bridge at the artificial lake. It was well designed to portray the majesty of a ruler. On the right side, divided by a wall and allowing entry via double doors, there was a hall where a long rectangular mahogany table was surrounded by chairs. These chairs were comfortable to sit on during a long meeting. On the left was where the kitchen and the dining room was. The kitchen was well designed, and so were the table and the chairs in the dining room. Then, there was the entertainment room that was located at the basement. It was separated by soundproof glass. Although it was divided into rooms, one could see that they were big enough to fit more than 10 people at the same time without squeezing. There were several types of entertainment, a place one could sing, karaoke. Then the place for pool and other indoor games that didn't take much space. There was a gym where one could work out. The first floor was full of big bedrooms. There were 8 big rooms occupying the entire floor. The second floor had a single bedroom. Then, there was an open space that faced the lake. There was a swimming pool that was located here, as well as a balcony that had several potted flowers that made the scenery here change from the domineering one to that of warmth and gentleness. Jack got back to the master bedroom, the only room on the top floor of the mansion, and lied on his back on the big bed. Then, he tried thinking of what he would be doing the following day. First thing first, he would be looking for the designer for the logo. After that, he would continue with the purchase of the stores so that he could expand the business further. Then, there was the issue of the headquarters of Jackson Enterprise. This needed him to get a business building. There, he would transfer all the management of the grocery department. This would be the centralization of management, but decentralization of the business. Now that he was only in Inchoate City, management wouldn't be a problem at all. The only thing that would be a problem would be the renovation of these stores. What he wanted the most from buying these grocery stores directly instead of opening another one was to use the already existing reputation of the store. Just as he was thinking, his phone rang. Upon receiving it, he found that it was George. He was asking where the Freightliner was supposed to be parked. Jack simply told him to bring it at PPP. That's how the Prince and Princess Palace was known in the city. After hanging up, Jack looked at the time. It was already 9. Then, the system, as if seeing through his impatience, began working. Ding. You've earned $113,650. Multiplier applied. You've received $11,365,000. Flyers bank account received $11,309,800. Current balance is $13,237,186. Ding. You've earned $113,650. Multiplier applied. You've received $11,365,000. Flyers bank account received $11,309,800. Ding. First income. As a reward, you gain a custom-made Bugatti Veyron. Jack was immediately surprised by the first income reward. After all, this wasn't the first time that he was starting a grocery and wasn't expecting that he would receive a reward. But even so, if he was getting rewarded, why was there only one reward instead of 7? Ding. The system can improve the quality of the reward. In the first-time grocery store income reward, it was decided that you'll be rewarded with a means of transport. Now that you've received 7 at the same time, it is decided that the quality of the reward would be improved instead of the quantity. After hearing this, Jack nodded somehow absent-mindedly. If it was true, then why was he being given a motorcycle and a Bugatti Veyron? After all, these cannot be used by the grocery store at all. Ding. That's not true at all. The income that you're receiving from the smaller-than-small groceries are nothing worth to mention. As a result, you're rewarded personally so that you can improve your influence and then gain a bigger grocery that would in turn reward you with something that can help you in the grocery. Jack shook his head helplessly. Then, he thought of something. Where's the Veyron parked? Jack was worried that the car would have been parked inside the compound. If so, then the guards would surely wonder how it got inside, and they hadn't allowed such a vehicle inside. Ding. No need to worry. The car is going to be delivered by the company. So, there's no need to worry about people wondering how a car suddenly appeared. Jack couldn't help but chuckle a little. After all, just the previous day, the system had just made the motorcycle appear at the entrance of the store and the keys in the counter's drawer. Now, it was claiming that nobody would notice this? As if noticing what Jack was thinking, another prompt arrived accompanied by the system's mechanical voice. Ding. The system's power is beyond what you can imagine. I just made everyone present at the store blind and made the bike appear there. After all, those people were not going to stay there and were going to leave. So, there was no need for people to wonder how the motorcycle appeared there when they were at another place. Then why not do the same thing with the Bugatti Veyron? Jack asked curiously. Ding. The reason is obvious. Since you purchased 7 stores today, then it was obvious that there were going to be 7 rewards. Once merged, you were going to receive the Bugatti. So, the procedures were completed early and so was the delivery. By the time that the delivery service arrives, you would have received the first income reward prompt. Ain't the system too powerful? Jack nodded. Yes, the system is too powerful. He was somehow speechless about the system. Anyway, he decided not to pursue the issue. He was just about to check something when he received a call. This was the captain that was in charge of the mansion's security, Eric. After receiving the call, Jack found out that there was a Freightliner that was claiming to be his and was supposed to be parked into the palace's parking lot. Jack immediately accepted and told him to allow the Freightliner to enter. Furthermore, he instructed that there was a car that was going to be delivered not long from now. So, they had to allow it to enter. After hanging up the call, Jack immediately got out of the bedroom and headed towards the parking lot. There, he found that George was just jumping down from the truck. Boss, George greeted him as soon as he noticed Jack's presence. No need to be nervous. So tell me, how was the work? Jack waved his hand when he saw that George was nervous in his presence before asking about the store's business. George was nervous from the moment that Jack began buying cars. Then, the supply that he had just delivered on this day was worth $500,000. Then, when he was told to deliver the truck at the palace, he was immediately stunned. Who would have thought that Jack would have purchased the most expensive mansion in the entire city? The business was good. The grocery products were good too. But the amount was too large, so the store was so small and the equipment there couldn't support all of them. Thus, Agnes decided to rent a warehouse where we stored all the products that needed certain conditions for them not to go bad. George responded to Jack's question. Look at me now. I forgot something important as a warehouse. But don't worry. You can deliver all the excess stock to Comes Grocers. This way, there would be nothing to worry about losses. As for a warehouse, I guess I have to get one. Jack slapped his forehead as he said this. He had forgotten that the grocery store was just a small one. As a result, there were things that couldn't fit in, or there were no suitable equipment that could be used to ensure that they don't go bad. Got it, boss, George replied happily. It seems that his boss had acquired another grocery. Although Comes Grocers weren't that much popular to those big shots of the city, they were well known to those from Lower Street. He knew that Alfic's grocery store was nothing on front of Comes. But who would have thought that the two of them would be under the same boss? Jack was just about to talk about the development of the store in Yellow Street when he saw a large security truck heading towards the parking lot. It arrived in front of them in a short period of time. Then, three bulky men wearing security uniform alighted from the truck. Then, a familiar person also alighted from the truck. When he saw Jack, he immediately hurried to where he was and said, "Nice to meet you again, Mr. Jack. I am sorry that we're late in our delivery, so I hope that you don't mind." This was Evans Morris, the manager of the Bentley 4-Foot shop in Inchoate City. They had just met during the day when Jack was buying cars, and one of the orders that he'd made was yet to be completed. Evans was at first excited and surprised when Jack decided to buy 25 cars at the same time. Furthermore, 24 out of them had to be repainted and so on. Then, when he was told to deliver a Bugatti Veyron to Jack, he couldn't help it. He kept on wondering, what the heck was Jack thinking? After all, he was buying so many cars. Was he going to start something with them, or what? Normally, the cars are delivered during the day. But the order to deliver the car on this day was given from the Bentley's headquarters in the country. So, he decided to deliver the car even if it was nighttime. The car that Jack had just purchased was a customized version, and thus was the only one in the world. When he saw the receipts, even he was frightened. That was the reason as to why he brought over security with guns. The Bugatti Veyron was worth $73 million. This was a big amount to spend on the car. But the features of the car were top-notch too. After all, the maximum speed of the Bugatti Veyron was 600 miles per hour. It was bulletproof. Then, there was a fact that it was luxurious. The number plate had Jack's name. As for comfort, although it was a sports car, they had made sure that whoever drives it was comfortable. "I don't mind at all," Jack replied, while at the same time, he thought, "System. You see, even the one delivering the car know that they're late. Ding. Business doesn't know about what time is. It only cares about the period that the business must be carried out. After all, if you're given 7 hours to complete a task, then you won't care if it's day or night, you'll have to complete it within the given time." "Jack, can we unload it?" Evans asked. "Just go ahead. I want to see how it looks." Jack nodded. George, who was behind Jack, was also curious about the vehicle that was delivered at night. After all, what he knew was that the delivery was always done during the day. If one ordered a car online at night, even if the store that he had ordered the car from was closer, the delivery would only happen the following day. The only solution to getting a car at night would be to go to the store that operates throughout. The truck doors were opened and soon. An exquisite car that was a definition of recherche. The car was painted a mix of blue, red, and yellow. The colors were mixed in such a way that it was not a mess but a show of beauty. Jack nodded in satisfaction after seeing the outer appearance of the Bugatti. He could see that the number plate of the car was inch A888. Then right above the plate number, there was a name written in capital letters. Jack. This word was a work of art too. Then, he immediately got into the car. The interior of the Bugatti Veyron was really something. It showed both luxury and comfort. Evans began introducing the car to Jack. Jack was also surprised by the properties of the car. He hadn't expected that the system knew his character so well. After the introduction, Evans then asked Alex to test the car out. But there was only one problem. Jack wasn't that good when it came to driving sports cars. Although he could drive them, he wasn't at the level that he could handle the Bugatti well. This was unlike the Bentley Continental GT. After all, the Bugatti had many buttons like that of a plane. So, Jack wasn't sure about what to do. Jack was left stunned for a while. Then he thought to himself, "It seems that the system won't let me be embarrassed." After a moment of thought, he asked expectantly, "What is the mission?" Ding. The mission that you'll have to complete so that you can permanently have the skill is as follows. Task: earn money by participating and winning a race. Time limit: 3 days. Jack thought for a moment and felt that the mission wasn't that difficult. There were several rich second-generation kids racing at the mountains. All he needed to do was to get there and sign up for the competition. The time limit that he had been given by the system was 3 days. He can complete all the things that need his urgent attention within 2 days. Then, on the 3rd day, he would be able to complete the mission given to him by the system. Anyway, he was wondering why the system would give him a mission like, win a race to earn money? Seriously? But he decided not to pursue the issue as he could see that the people outside were giving him strange gazes. After all, he had gotten into the car for about 3 minutes, but there was no activity yet. They were thinking to themselves, why isn't he driving already? Or he doesn't know how to drive it. If so, then why did he buy it? Of course, they wouldn't dare to say this out loud. The first reason was that they didn't know Jack's character, if he would be offended by that statement and retaliate or not. The second reason was because none of them knew of Jack's background. If the background was too big, then it was better to try to get on his good side than trying to anger him. At this time, Jack stretched his head out of the window and called George. "I know you like cars so much. Come in here and experience it. Maybe in the future, if you work well, I'll reward you with a sports car." George, who was still speculating the reason as to why Jack wasn't driving yet, immediately became flustered after hearing Jack's words. One had to know that this Bugatti Veyron was worth $73 million. He himself had never been in a sports car worth several $100,000, let alone one that cost several tens of millions. Of course, he was happy that his boss wanted him to try the car with him. After all, this was the first time that the boss was going to drive it. Then, what made him even happy was the promise that the boss had just made. He would receive a sports car of his own as long as he performed his duties well. But of course, he knew that the most important thing was loyalty. If he proved his loyalty, his boss would surely treat him better. Thinking of this, he immediately rushed to the car while ignoring Evans's envious gazes. After all, although Evans was selling the cars, that didn't mean that he could afford them even with his high salary. There were cars that were absolutely out of his league, and the Bugatti Veyron was one of them. After reaching the car, George immediately got in after Jack opened the door for him. After George got in, Jack immediately made a decision to accept the system mission. "I'll take it." Ding. Advance reward claimed. Professional driving skills acquired. Merging the skill with the host. 10%, 50%, 80%, 100%. Merging completed. Task assigned. The host will have to complete it within 3 days or he would receive system punishment. As soon as he said that he accepted the task in exchange for the reward, he felt warmth washing over his body, more so his head. It took a single second for all of this to happen. As Jack regained his focus, George was done putting on the seatbelt. Jack, on the other hand, he felt that he was very familiar with the sports car. It was as if he had been handling the car since he was born. He immediately started the car, put on the safety belt before stepping on the accelerator. Please visit panda-1.co.m. Vroom, vroom. The roars of the Bugatti echoed in the silent night. Then, within one swift motion, the Bugatti immediately galloped towards the gate. The acceleration of the Bugatti was about 100 kilometers in 2.5 seconds. So, in no time, they had arrived at the gate. The guards had already gotten ready to open the gate as soon as they saw Jack getting in the car. So, they immediately pushed the gate open, letting Jack get out of the palace unhindered. As soon as he got on the road that led out of the residential area, the speed of the Bugatti Veyron immediately shot up. Considering the fact that the community here was where the rich stayed, the number of cars that could be found on the road were small. For this reason, Jack had no reservations at all. He wanted to test the speed of this Bugatti. After all, what was this issue of it having a maximum speed of about 350 miles per hour only for it to be driven at a speed of 60 miles per hour or less. George, who was sitting on the passenger seat, was immediately frightened by the way that Jack was driving. After all, the speed was just fast in that the vehicles that they were meeting or overtaking only noticed that a car had passed by a second after they had already gone past. This was the first time that George had seen a car move like this on such a road. After all, although they were racing back then, but the road that they were using was a mountainous one that would have been cleared before the competition. At the corners, as long as he could see what was coming from the other side, Jack never reduced the speed and did the drift. He wasn't worried about the car flipping over. After all, with the professional driving skills, there was no way that he could get into an accident due to his driving. With drifts, Jack went around the residential area for 2 laps before heading back to the palace. To go around the residential area for 2 laps not only took Jack about half an hour. The guards immediately opened the gate after hearing the roaring of the Bugatti's engine. Although the car was moving at a high speed, Jack was able to stop the car right on time in the parking lot, just beside the Bentayga. George had previously parked the Freightliner on the further end of the parking lot. On the other hand, Jack was parking closet to the center. At this moment, the walls of the parking lot were down. After getting out of the car, George immediately let out a sigh of relief. After all, the Bugatti's speed and Jack's insane driving had frightened him to the extent that he wanted to immediately jump out of the car. But he knew that if he jumped out of the car, he would immediately die or have most of the bones in his body broken due to rough landing in the tarmac. The only comfort that he had was that he was putting on a seatbelt and the car was bulletproof. That implied that not even a bullet could pierce through it. So, normal collision or flipping accidents wouldn't be able to destroy the car. Jack got out of the car and looked at Evans before saying, "The car is good." Then, he took the receipts and the documents that showed that he'd received the car before signing them. With Jack's skill as a professional driver, he could immediately find out if there was a problem with the car. So, although he wouldn't be able to deal with most of the problems if there were, he could at least deal with the most simple ones. After sending Evans and his team off, Jack looked at George and asked, "Where do you live? I'll take you there." George was immediately flustered and scared. After all, with Jack's maniac driving, although he was a cars enthusiast, he couldn't enjoy the thrill of the sports car if Jack was going to be the driver. So, he immediately thought of refusing. After all, it was still 9, close to 10. So, he could still get a taxi to get him home. After thinking it through in a short moment, he replied, "Thank you, boss, but I wouldn't want to disturb you. I will just take a cab home. You know that it's rare to find a cab in this part of the city. After all, almost all of those living in this area have their own cars." As Jack said this, he headed towards the Bentley Continental GT. He hadn't tested the car yet. George couldn't argue back as what Jack had said was the truth. He would have to walk to the area where the taxis passed or wait here for a chance that there was a person coming to this residential area in a cab. For some reason, when he saw that Jack wasn't going to drive the Bugatti Veyron, he was relieved. After all, the speed of the Bugatti Veyron was far higher than that of the Bentley Continental GT. So, he immediately followed Jack and entered the Bentley Continental GT.
Thank you for listening this, and please, if you need more, please drop comment.